All right, the UFC is back in action next weekend, May 30th. The card came together very quickly outside of a handful of fights, and one of those just announced bouts includes this man who's going to welcome Brandon Royval to the UFC, Tim Elliott. This one has fireworks written all over it. How are you, sir?
Oh, man, I'm great. I'm excited. Ready to go.
Great to have you here. Like we mentioned, this thing came together very quickly. First off, I know you've been trying to get a fight booked for a little while now. How did this particular matchup come together with a guy like Brandon?
I mean, my manager hit me up, said, hey, we got a fight if you want it, Jordan Espinoza. I was like, sure, I'm on it. They usually know like not to hit me up unless it's a sure deal because they know I'm probably going to say yes. I mean, I got a kid. I'm just bought a house. So like I'm trying to get some money. So they said yes, or they offered me the fight. I assumed that was going to happen. And then like an hour later, they called and said the fight wasn't going to happen. So I was like, oh, shit. So I just kind of went back to chilling and enjoying quarantine. And then maybe like 2 hours after that, my manager hit me up again and said, you're fighting one of my guys, Brandon Royval, a young kid, a kid I've trained with a few times back in the day a little bit. So I know a little bit about him. But again, I'm just, even though it was kind of up and down, I'm just excited to have a fight.
Were you a bit frustrated when you found out that Jordan booked another fight with Mark De La Rosa, or once you saw it would be a 35 fight and we're in the middle of a pandemic, you sort of understood things a little bit more?
I mean, I'm a little frustrated because, we're both on 2-fight losing streaks, De La Rosa and myself. They called and offered me the fight first. I said yes, and then he turned the fight down. So to see that he accepted De La Rosa right away was a little bit – I get it. It makes sense. And I know like usually when fighters turn down fights, it's usually not the fighter, it's their coach or the manager. So like it wasn't that big a deal, but of course I'm going to talk shit on the internet anyway. But so like no worries, no hard feelings. I know the fight game. Like I want the best matchups possible as well. And like not everybody is lucky enough to have coaches and managers say, hey, maybe that's not the best fight. So like, again, no worries. I just like shit talking on the internet. It's gotten me fights before. And I feel like it put me up in a good position to where if I win this fight and Jordan wins, like we could maybe be lined up later on down the road.
Just planting those seeds. That's all. Just planting those seeds for the future. There's
right.
Nothing wrong with that. You fighting on short notice during a crazy time in the world, this seems like it's right up your alley, is it not?
It is, man. That's how I got into the UFC. I fought John Dodson on like 6 days notice. And then got fired by the UFC and then got back into the UFC. My first fight was a world title fight against Demetrius Johnson. And now we're having a pandemic and there's no fans and there's no sports. And then, I'm just super blessed in this sport. Like I've had a long road and I've fought a lot of good guys, but it's all been good. It's all been positive. I've loved every second of being in the UFC and I like the awkwardness. I like it when it's weird and there's no like advantages here. Like everybody was in quarantine, everybody was locked down. And the question is like, did you sit at home and not do shit or did you go out and get better? So like, that's kind of interesting. And like judging by the fights that have been happening, like the fights are great, man. People are coming out, they're fighting to win. The decisions are super close. When they're decisions, the knockouts are crazy. The submissions are crazy. So it seems like during the pandemic, everybody like went home and sharpened their tools. It seems like.
Yeah, and speaking of some of those crazy fights and fighting good guys, you had that crazy fight with Oscar Adesanya in January, a guy that a lot of people are very high on in this division. Ultimately, you didn't come away with the victory, but what did you take away from that battle with a guy like that?
Oh man, I would like to run that fight back. He clipped me in the first round and I was out of it. Like after the first round, I had people like, oh, why would you have your hands down? And I was like, man, I don't remember anything. When my coaches came into that fight, after the fight was over, they told me to put my hands up. And I was just like, why would I do that? I just got knocked out in the first round. I had no recollection of rounds 2 or 3. I had no recollection of ever talking to my coaches in the corner. And I was almost upset. And I was so knocked out that I didn't even realize that I was tired. I was upset because I was like, man, I didn't get a chance to go out and get tired. And my coaches are like, what the fuck are you talking about? So I feel like I kind of got gypped in that fight a little bit, although like going back and watching it, I'm glad I got to at least go out on my shield. But no, I took a lot out of that fight. I was worried about his guard. So we worked staying on the feet. And then like after I took him down and watched the fight, I was like, we should have just took him down right away. That should have been the game plan, was just put him on his back. But you live and you learn. And I have a particular fighting style that I like to stick to. And it's not really even a style. It's like, I like to mix it up and I like to have fun. And sometimes you get caught in those positions and situations and, you live by the sword, you die by the sword.
Wait a minute. So you thought that you got knocked out in the first round in that fight.
But,
When did you know that like it went the distance? Was it when you went back and actually watched it, or did your coaches sort of convince you that you went a full 15 minutes and you don't remember 2/3 of the fight?
well, they told me, and I was like, I just kind of kept my mouth shut because I didn't want to, obviously didn't know what was going on. But that was the first fight I ever went to the hospital afterwards either. And like, but again, like if I get to go out and perform, like I don't care if my arms are broken or my legs are broken, but I don't want what happened. I don't want to be in a situation like the Davis and Figueiredo fight where I went in, I was winning the fight, I shot a bad takedown and got caught in a submission. I don't mind getting beat up, but I want to like be able to perform. I want to go out and get tired. I want to have, I want to show that I can go 15 minutes. And at least I did that in the Askar fight. But I didn't get the chance to in the Figueiredo fight at all. But that's just the sport, it's a crazy game.
So when you went back and watched it, did anything seem familiar at all, or was it like you were watching a fight for the very first time?
It was pretty cool because it was like an out of body experience when I was watching it. It was like I was watching myself, but it wasn't me. But it was cool to know like that when situations get that bad and I'm not in it, that like my body knows like, all right, this is what we do. This is what you're used to doing. It's not like I went into autopilot, and my autopilot is to start punching and kicking and again, didn't happen the way that I wanted it to happen, but I'm glad I can like go back when I'm older and say, I went 3 rounds with this guy. I did this good. I did that good. And not like, oh shit, I just got caught with something silly.
I can't wait to call my older brother after this because I remember watching and covering that fight vividly. And my older brother, who watches MMA from time to time, very rarely, texted me that night and said, the guy in the mullet is out of his mind. So wait till I call him and tell him that you do remember, most of that fight.
Yeah, I was for sure out of my mind. So I would like to run that back. All goes well for me. I get a win here this coming up weekend, get Jordan Espinoza as soon as his fight's over, and then, sit around and wait. I don't know what's going to happen. I would like the Askar rematch. I think Joe B is going to get a fight Figueiredo again for the belt. That seems like what they're going to do. So like I feel like if win these two and maybe get that rematch with Askarov, maybe I could be in the mix. And dream coming true would be me getting to fight my teammate Joseph Benavidez. Like that would be good for him and me and my team. Like that would just be like a storybook ending. He beat me in the UFC. He coached me on the Ultimate Fighter all the way to get a fight for a UFC world title. Now we trained together. We had a similar coach kill himself in Robert Follis. Like we just had a lot of like things together to be able to fight Joe B for the UFC world title would be a dream come true. Even though we're friends and teammates, it would just be like best case scenario for me.
Have you guys talked about that before? Had a back and forth being like, someday, man, you and I, we're going to get in there and fight for the belt.
No, but I think he knows where I stand. I think he knows like me wanting to fight him isn't anything except for that just means we're both like at the very best and right where we should be. Because the only time we would ever fight each other again would be for that, either like a number 1 contender spot or for the world title. Otherwise, there's just too many other guys. But yeah, I think he knows like that would be for me, especially not so much for him, but for me, that would be a dream come true to get fight my teammate and one of my mentors and a person who actually coached me and helped me get to be able to fight for a UFC world title to begin with.
What a story that would be. Now you get Brandon Royval, who makes his UFC debut, and a lot of people have been saying for a long time now that this guy had deserved a call up to the UFC. Even fighters in the top 10 of your division wanted it because they just want to fight the guy because he brings so much energy and awkwardness and excitement to fights. And, for you, like you said, you have familiarity with Brandon, but this one has potential to win all the bonuses, does it not?
For sure. 100%. And that's really what I'm after. Like, I'm not chasing wins anymore in the sport. I'm chasing the checks. And the way the checks go is you have to leave some of your preconceived notions at the door. You can't just go in with techniques and shit. You got to pull out that Justin Gaethje card, and just put it all on the line, and that's how you get paid. And this kid, he does that every single time. So for me, it's going to be important to like make sure and get out of the first round. Don't get caught in nothing crazy in the first round. Let my experience kind of take over and settle in. I think if I do that, it should be a pretty good night for me.
I spoke to Brandon yesterday, and he told me that a very mutual friend of yours / coach of yours, James Krause, he will be staying out of this one because he knows both of you guys. He doesn't want to be in the middle of it. You're a vet. You've been around the block a few times. Is it going to be weird not having him be a part of this at all?
Uh, yes and no. More importantly, right when I found out it was Brandon, I called James right away and was like, "Hey, are you going to be?" Because if James is going to be in his corner, it's going to change things a little bit for me. I can handle not having James in my corner, but I don't know about seeing and hearing him on the other side. So, but no, James assured me like, you know, where his head's at, and James is one of those guys. He's just honest with everybody. So like, he just told me what he thought, and then like I went from there. But yeah, it's disappointing to not have him in the corner. James is he's one of those special guys. He knows how to say. I've been in situations where weight cuts more than fights, but I've been in weight cut situations where I was done. I told him I was done, and he pulled me through, made sure that I made weight, and like wouldn't have been able to do it without him for sure, 100%. The Demetrius Johnson fight, I would not have made weight without James Krause. So it hurts not having him in the corner, but at the same time, like as long as he's not coaching against me, I feel like we're on a even playing field.
He took a lot of heat for that Anthony Smith Glover Teixeira fight. He was part of that corner, and Anthony came out and essentially, which I respected a lot, and said, "Listen, blame's on me. My coaches and corners are well aware that I will legit fire them if they stop any fight that I'm in." Well, and who the hell am I, looked at the fight last week in a certain way. I also know that I'm not a coach and I'm not a fighter. But how did you react to all that heat being thrown Krause's way?
I mean, it's nothing that James can't handle. He's had, James is an outspoken dude. Like he has opinions and it's just one of those things. Like you're not going to make everybody happy, but for the most part, people they don't understand like what guys will do and Anthony Smith is one of those guys to where he'll get hurt and then he'll knock somebody out. So like you can't really count Anthony Smith out in those situations. And like Anthony Smith said it best, like we're not going to have coaches in the corner that are going to quit on us, because the fighters aren't going to quit on the coaches. So to have a coach say that he would throw in the towel for the safety of his fighters doesn't seem like a coach who's been around a long time. I've never seen it done. You can't even throw the towel in MMA anymore. And if it was so bad to where the corner's got to stop it, it's the referee's job to step in and make that decision. Like the fighters obviously can't be in control of it, and the corner same way, because the fighters are always going to, tooth and nail. It's to the death all the time. That's the sport we chose, and that's not going to change. And they would have been getting beat the other way if you'd have thrown in the towel. They'd have been getting shit for throwing in the towel. So
yeah,
it goes both ways.
It really does. It's a pretty bizarre sport, especially, in your last fight, had your team known that you were out of it, they might have thrown in the towel, which makes things very interesting. And who would blame them? Would you be mad at them if they did?
I wouldn't have known until afterwards. But same goes for me in that sense, though. Like I trust my coaches and I trust James to where even if I think I'm done, if James doesn't think I'm done, I'm going to listen to him. And on the same note, if James threw in the towel and said you're done, I might be upset, but I know James has my best interest in mind, so I would take it either way. And the fact that James didn't throw in the towel just lets me know James thought that Anthony was still in that fight and could possibly still win. And those are the kind of coaches that I want. I want a coach that thinks I'm going to win no matter fucking what. And James is that guy. He puts everything into his guys.
You've been in these types of situations before in terms of the ambiance heading into this fight. Like you've been on The Ultimate Fighter, you fought in these types of environments before that you're going to see next weekend in Las Vegas. I mean, do you prefer having the crowd in the noise, or do you prefer hearing nothing other than 10 or so voices and leather smacking skin?
Man, I'm a big noise and big crowd guy. I'm not a practice warrior. Like I get my ass kicked in practice by everybody. I can only go so hard in practice. I'm in there to try to get better and learn and have fun. So I hate the practice sparring scenario. I like it when people are looking and watching and it's loud, because I feel like that's the only time I ever want people's eyes are on me, is when I'm fighting, is because it's the only thing I'm really good at, and I put all this time and effort into it. I want to hear it and I want to feel it, whether it's boos or cheers or whatever. I want to hear it and I want to feel it. And so for me, it's a disadvantage to fight in that silence. But at the same time, I've had fights, Ultimate Fighter fights, where it's been like that. So I don't know. I thought maybe at some point they would do like an audio where they would just have a button they push and the crowd would be like, oh!
Put it right in the sound system when something big happens. I mean, heading into this fight, it's hard to like get in the mind of specific fighters, but looking at it on paper, some would feel like you're going to have some pressure on you here because, I mean, do you thrive off of that? Because on paper, people say this is potentially a do or die fight for you coming in on back-to-back losses. Do you put that kind of pressure on yourself, or do you block that all out?
I mean, it's hard. You try to block it out, but I mean, it's one of those things. It's always do or die. Just because you're on a 2-fight losing streak and you lose again doesn't mean they're going to cut you. If you have 2 losses in a row and you have an awesome fight and you still lose, they might not cut you. Or on the other hand, if you're Gerald Harris and you have a couple wins in a row and they don't like you and they think you're boring, they can cut you anyway. So wins and losses doesn't necessarily keep your job. It's how you act. You know, I'm lucky enough to be in a good standing with all the people that work in the UFC, like all the people at the PI, the janitors, everybody. Like I live in Vegas. I talk to those people, the people that work in the lunchroom. So I have close relationships. And I try not to put the loss pressure on myself, like, oh, this is it, because I've been there before. I've been cut by the UFC. But you know, like I said, it's always do or die for us. We never know when we're going to get fired. We could be fired for no reason. Like we're private contractors. So every fight is like that. The pressure is the same on this fight as any fight, the same as it was when I fought Johnson. They're always the same. It's always do or die. You're always worried about it. In the back of your mind.
How does this thing go down next Saturday against a very exciting newcomer in Brandon Royval? Like, what's the headline going to read when this thing's over?
You know what? I honestly, I think he's really talented. I think he's dangerous. But I'm not going to fuck around with him. I'm going to go forward right away. I'm going to get my hands on him, and I'm going to big brother. I'm going to put the squeeze on him. I don't think he's had it hit his man strength yet. I would really just like to rough him up early and get in there and get out early.
I have to ask you this question before we let you go. And if you guys watching this interview right now haven't seen it, I highly recommend you jump on Tim Elliott's Instagram page, because you posted a photo of a pair of sandals. And in the middle of these sandals were 3 words. It was bad mother effer. Like, do you own these sandals? Like, where did you find these things? How did you find these things?
I do own these sandals. They were custom made for me. If you go on Instagram, it's @toehold. They're dope flip-flops. Yeah, they make custom flip-flops for, Ben Askren has like his pair like famous because that's all he ever wears. But no, they're super high quality. They got a lifetime warranty. You can always go and get them retreaded. But yeah, @toehold on Instagram, man, they're dope flip-flops.
Yeah, they look super comfortable. And plus, I mean, how can you ignore bad mother effer? It's just impossible.
They are comfortable, but it's like a nice leather shoe. You got to break it in. Once it's broken, it's amazing. But there's a break-in process. But once they're in, it's nice.
So keep that in mind, everybody. Tim, outside of the main event, I have my eye on this fight more than any other next Saturday in Las Vegas against Brandon Royval, and I appreciate the time very much. All the best to you during fight week and in the fight itself. I know you're local in Las Vegas right now, so it makes things a little bit easier for you. But thank you very much, Tim, and best of luck to you next Saturday.
I appreciate the support. Thanks, man. I won't disappoint.